been
And look, you've been coming here to Melbourne for a long time for this tournament, more than 20 years, and I'm just curious sort of what you make of the evolution of this place and the vibes of this tournament. There's been a lot of talk about they're smashing attendance records constantly, and there's also complaints on the other side that it's gotten overcrowded and it's hard to get into courts, and things have gotten maybe too corporate or too commercial on certain different sides of this tournament. So I'm wondering from your perspective as a veteran of this place who's seen the years go by here and just lots of different tennis angles, like what you make of that sort of push-pull between excitement over growing and the idea that something's being lost by maybe being overstuffed or getting too crowded, too corporate, too commercial, too sort of profit-centric at times.
Having too much crowd on this or any other tennis tournament is a very good problem to have. I think there are much worse problems to have. So I think every tournament wants record-breaking attendance and ticket sales, and that's what I've been hearing actually this year and the last couple of years for most of the slams and tournaments. So I mean it's a good sign. I mean obviously we want more attention, more people coming and wanting to watch the tennis live and follow it and live stream, etc. Obviously I don't know the possibilities of further expanding the facilities or not. I'm not obviously familiar with that dynamic, but I like what I have seen as evolution of this tournament. I like when the tournament is nurturing a mindset of always wanting to improve and get better in terms of facility, providing better conditions for players to practice, play, recover, and that's what I've been seeing. I mean, first time I came over to Australia, for the juniors, 2003, I think, or something like that, 2005 for the...
Take a moment to visualize this situation. What if I told you that achieving the highest level of success can turn out to be your biggest enemy? That the fame you've spent your entire life striving for could imprison you and prevent you from escaping? The narrative I'm going to tell you isn't some attention-grabbing headline. This is an in-depth exploration of a reality that will leave your head spinning. Here, we are discussing Novak Djokovic, a man who has witnessed it all in the tennis game, revealing at last what actually occurs in Melbourne behind closed doors. Get ready for his recent admission regarding the whole chaos surrounding the emerging Filipino phenomenon. Everything you believe to be true about professional tennis is going to be completely disproved by Alex Eala. What is actually going on here then? Are we witnessing a total collapse of the organization? Or does this simply occur when greatness reaches a breaking point? Here's the worst part. Why does Djokovic genuinely believe that the biggest issue anyone might face is crushing crowding? Let's dissect this entire situation piece by piece.
I remember we were using the Gym B, as it was called, which was across the road. Forgot what the name of that AFL club is. Essendon, maybe? Something like that. Sorry? Collingwood, sorry, my bad. I know there's a big rivalry, so I apologize. So they were allowing the Australian Open to use their facilities and the bigger gym, ice baths and everything. And then obviously there was an expansion of the facilities with the National Tennis Center, with indoor courts, more practice courts, better recovery, more locker rooms, better facilities for the player dining. So all positive signs, to be honest. I think Australia has always been one of the best in that. So I don't see any negatives there. And now it's really about how do you find balance and how do you manage the amount of people that is entering the premises, and whether I saw the other day with Alex Eala, that's been a talk, which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest. So things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule them on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's so young and she's just coming through. So and obviously the first couple rounds, the schedule is so packed. The big courts with big names, it's difficult. It's not easy to manage that, but again, it's a good problem to have, to be honest. Let's just imagine if there's a lack of people coming, or that stands are empty. That's a bigger problem. I mean,
the chat began with what appeared to be a straightforward inquiry about how things have changed and how the present mood felt. However, Novak's answer took us on a trip through time that took us back 2 decades to an entirely other world. Shut your eyes and join me in visualizing this. We are discussing young Novak around 2003 or even 2005. Knowing where this all happened is more important than knowing the precise year. Forget about the amazing glass buildings and cutting-edge facilities you see all over the place these days. Do you want to hear the true tale of where tennis greats formerly worked? They were working out in a simple gym. Yes, it is correct. We are discussing a typical gym that was once owned by the Collingwood Football Club. Are you able to comprehend that? In a room they shared with the Taro from across the street, future world champions were actually exchanging training gear and ice baths. You can hear this amazing mix of happy memories and utter wonder at how drastically things has changed since then when Djokovic reflects on those early days. From those incredibly humble beginnings, we evolved into what we are today. The National Tennis Center has futuristic-looking indoor courts, dining experiences for gamers that might rival the planet's most upscale eateries, as well as recovery facilities that look like they belong in science fiction. Australia wasn't merely making little advancements. They were building something that looked like the tennis empire. However, this is what no one discusses. Every empire of this size eventually encounters the same unavoidable obstacle. It becomes overrun with people. This leads us to the topic that everyone is discussing in low tones: the elephant in the room. Is there a breaking point for the overcrowding? Has this competition evolved into a commercial monster that is literally devouring itself? Are the complaints coming in from all sides? The crowds have grown to the point where many people find them to be totally overpowering, and fans are constantly irritated by how difficult it has gotten to actually enter courts. However, Novak's instant response to this was like a well-placed winner later on. His remarks were brutally honest and icy. He referred to it as an issue. Of course. However, he later added something that surprised everyone. He continued, "It's actually an incredible problem to have." You heard that right. Djokovic really thinks that crowded stadiums and tickets that sell out in a matter of seconds don't indicate a crisis. This is the greatest fantasy scenario, in his opinion. Consider things from the other side. Imagine for a moment what it would be like if you could hear a pin drop during a match and the stands were mostly empty. That is the true disaster that keeps Novak awake at night. The idea of no one showing up at all, rather than the never-ending lines of people waiting to enter. However, from this point on, the story becomes much more intense. When they began discussing Alex Eala, the ultimate golden child of Philippine tennis, it was the most combustible section of the entire conversation. The moniker that is currently the talk of the sport. Her predicament wasn't only the result of inadequate preparation and coordination. No one could have imagined this fan eruption. Djokovic presented the hard reality that some powerful people were frantically attempting to avoid admitting, building on decades of expertise that you just can't buy or fake. You could definitely make the argument that the scheduling was poorly handled, he stated outright. It was an outright acknowledgement. They had placed a celebrity whose fame spans the entire country on one of the smaller courts. Try to picture what really took place in this situation. Thousands and thousands of individuals are attempting to fit into the same area at once. While the folks in charge of the show are frantically trying to figure out what to do, the entire nation is supporting its champion. However, Djokovic has an entirely different perspective on the entire chaotic event. He perceives the emergence of something genuinely unique among all that chaos. The Philippines is being represented by her. We're talking about a massive country that's been starving for this kind of glory, he notes. Additionally, she has grown to be the most significant figure in their athletic history. Her bouts were surrounded by complete turmoil, intense crowds, and pressure. That is the best evidence that tennis is still relevant today. The sport is still very much alive and well. Managing these enormous crowds during the tournament's opening days might be a logistical headache, particularly since all time slots are fully occupied and the prime courts are automatically designated for the biggest known names. It's an incredibly difficult task. However, as Novak puts it, consider what would happen if no one was motivated to go. The actual catastrophe would be represented by that situation. This is Djokovic's bottom line, presented with the ruthless honesty that comes only from someone who has experienced everything. Evolution is painful, and chaos is unavoidable when something expands this quickly. However, the alternative to all of this chaos is to watch the sport gradually become obsolete. We are currently living in what is essentially a new golden age, with enormous waves of new followers coming in from all over the world and decades-old customs colliding head-on. I want you to think about this question for a while. Which would you prefer? Fighting your way through enormous crowds to see history being made in front of your eyes, or the comfort and tranquility of a half-empty stadium where you can hear every footstep? Give it some serious thought, because your response could decide the future of this entire sport. What if I told you that reaching the very top of success could actually become your biggest challenge? That the fame and recognition athletes spend their entire lives chasing might one day surround them with chaos they never expected. That's exactly the situation unfolding right now at the Australian Open. And the person revealing the truth behind it all is none other than Novak Djokovic. Djokovic has been coming to Melbourne for more than 2 decades. He has witnessed the tournament evolve from a relatively simple sporting event into one of the biggest spectacles in global tennis. And when he recently opened up about the changes he has seen over the years, his perspective gave fans a rare look at what's really happening behind the scenes. It all started with a simple question during an interview. A reporter asked Djokovic what he thought about the evolution of the tournament, the incredible attendance records, the massive crowds, and the growing debate about whether the event has become too crowded, too commercial, or too corporate. And Djokovic's response was surprisingly honest. According to him, having too many fans is actually one of the best problems a tournament can have. In his words, every tournament in the world dreams of record-breaking attendance. Packed stadiums, sold-out tickets, and global attention are signs that the sport is alive and thriving. Compared to the nightmare scenario of empty seats and fading interest, overwhelming crowds are something organizers should actually celebrate. To understand why Djokovic feels this way, you have to travel back in time. More than 20 years ago, when he first arrived in Australia as a young junior player, the tournament looked completely different. Back then, the facilities were far more modest. Players trained in simple gyms, sometimes even borrowing facilities from local sports clubs. Djokovic himself remembers training in a gym across the road that belonged to the famous Collingwood Football Club. Future champions were sharing ice baths and training equipment in spaces that were never originally designed for a global tennis event. But over the years, the transformation has been incredible. Melbourne built the modern National Tennis Centre. New indoor courts appeared. Practice courts expanded. Recovery areas improved. Player dining facilities became world-class. Step by step, the tournament grew into what many now consider one of the most advanced tennis venues in the world. And with that growth came something inevitable. More fans. More attention. More demand. Every year, the Australian Open keeps breaking its own attendance records. More people travel to Melbourne from all over the world just to experience the atmosphere of the tournament. But with that excitement comes another question. Has the success become too much? Some fans complain about long lines, overcrowded courts, and the difficulty of getting into popular matches. Others argue that the tournament has become overly commercialized, focused too heavily on profit and corporate sponsorship. Yet Djokovic sees the situation from a completely different perspective. For him, the real danger isn't overcrowding. The real danger is losing the crowd altogether. In his view, if stadiums ever become half-empty and fans stop showing up, that would be the true crisis for tennis. And this entire conversation took an even more dramatic turn when the discussion shifted toward one rising star who has recently captured global attention: Alex Eala. Eala represents something special in the tennis world. She comes from the Philippines, a country with a massive population and a rapidly growing interest in tennis.